Hi, I'm Brianna James.
And I'm Viola Prus.
In the last couple of months, the St. Thomas University journalism students have been in contact with Constable Rick Mooney, the communications officer for the Fredericton Police Force.
Constable Mooney frequently declines to answer questions of journalism students from the New Brunswick Beacon who work on local stories.
He said that student journalists aren't real media, and therefore he doesn't treat us as such.
However, he does help students who work for the local university papers, the Brunswicken and the Aquinian.
In one conversation with a student, he said, and I quote, "I will not hold you to the same standards that I hold the other professional media out there."
After a run-in with a student, we invited him to class last week.
This is the interview we conducted with Constable Rick Mooney.
I was born in St. John, New Brunswick. I was brought up in a little place called Wirral, New Brunswick, so I'm not sure many people don't know where Wirral is. It's kind of at the end of the cow path, and then you take a left and you go a few more miles, and that's where I grew up. But yeah, so I grew up there. It was in a rural area, and I went to Ormocto High School. That was my high school. So if there's any FHS grads here, please don't hold that against me. I played, I was heavy into sports, played volleyball quite heavily in high school, and ended up going on. I played Canada Games volleyball back in '89. And I attended UNB here in the phys ed program. And really didn't know what I wanted to pursue for a career at that time. I thought it was phys ed teacher, perhaps, but that didn't seem to pan out. I was too interested in other things besides studies at that time, and so my path went in a bit of a different direction. And it wasn't until I was approximately 25 years old that I really started to consider policing as a profession. And so once I sort of figured out that that was what I wanted to do, I pursued it. And it took me 5 years. I was 30 years old when I entered the world of policing. I started my career with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in 2000 and served 4 years in southern Manitoba on general duty police work there. And after that I applied to, being from this area, my wife and I decided we wanted to come back home to be near family, and so an opportunity came up with the Fredericton Police Force, and I applied. That was, it'll be 7 years ago in February, and really happy with that decision, and really enjoyed working here in Fredericton. And
you said that you're married, and I remember I think it was last year when you came to class, you also mentioned that you have daughters?
Yes.
How long have you been married for? How old are your kids?
Oh, you're never supposed to ask a guy how long he's been married, because now I have to think, right?
General idea.
Okay. So I've been married 14 years, and I have two wonderful little girls, 6 and 4. And my oldest her name is Georgia, and my youngest is Marley. Absolutely love being a dad. That's my real job. This is just what I do to make money, but that's my real work in my view. And I take that very seriously, and I say that with seriousness as well. Really love being a dad.
So would you say going home is one of your ways of de-stressing, maybe after a long day of work?
That would certainly be one of the ways. You know, there are different things that I do to de-stress. And I should mention, being in police work, as you can well imagine, can be a very stressful job at times. And it's interesting that some of the stress is not necessarily what you would think. A lot of people who aren't in that world would consider, you know, a dangerous situation to be a stressful situation. And that's very true, but often the stress comes from, you know, court appearances, some of the internal administrative processes, and actually, out of 11 years of being in this field, the media relations role has been probably, and I would say not probably, has been the most stressful job for me thus far. And so de-stressing, going for walks, you know, spending time with family, depending on the mood that my wife and the girls are in, that not necessarily is a de-stress, but I do enjoy spending time with my family and spending time outdoors, things like that.
What inspires you to be a police officer? Why did you want? Could you go into a bit more detail why you want to be a police officer?
Well, that's a real interesting question, and I certainly can go into detail. It's an interesting story. I'm a believer in God, and after graduating university, I was very confused about what I wanted to do and where I was going, and so I actually spent a lot of time in prayer and praying about it. And so, without boring you with a lot of those real intimate details, there was some interesting things that happened that seemed to help me understand the direction. And sure, I was reading. Well, I was actually in a church service, and the pastor was speaking on. There's a verse, I believe it's in Corinthians, about submitting to authorities and things like that, and it was just a real strong impression in my heart that this is really what you should be doing, what your path is. And again, I don't want to get all hokey here with that, but it was just, it was an impression, right? We feel certain things at different times, and so I sort of continued to pray about that, and there were different things. I had just met the woman who was now my wife at that time, and she told me that was something that she had been thinking about for me as well, and other people made different comments, and so I started to pursue that. And I remember speaking with a friend of mine whose dad was actually a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police at that time, and he said, Rick, you know what, that's nice, that's a great goal, but they're not hiring anyone right now, and you get an uphill battle. This was back when they weren't hiring. Actually, they had closed the training academy for a year back then. And so I said, this is what I really feel I want to do. So if I get in, then we'll know that it's God. So and I remember specifically saying to him, I don't know if it's going to be this year or if it's going to be 5 years, but I said, I know I'm going to get in. Well, it was 5 years, and so yeah. And there's a lot more to that story, but it was an interesting path for sure. And so I took a lot of different courses, took a lot of jobs on, a number of jobs like working security or teaching first aid. I took French classes at night. Just anything I could do to help my chances of getting in. And I remember, of course, this was 25 when this first happened, and I remember being approaching 30, and a lot of my family members were saying to me things like, you know what, you really should start thinking about getting a real job, and this whole idea about policing, you know what, come on, right? And so this was happening to me quite frequently, and I started beginning to get quite discouraged about it. So I really started questioning that, and so I went back to prayer again, interestingly. And one night I was reading in the Bible about the story of Joseph, and how Joseph went down to Egypt. He was sold by his brothers to slave traders, and went down and spent some time in prison, and then eventually, through a series of events, became the second most powerful person in Egypt, and went into the service of Pharaoh, the king there. And the Bible says that Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service. And my eyes stopped there, and it was another one of these strong impression moments. And I just felt, you know what? I was 29 at the time, and I felt that this was going to be it. And interestingly, every time I wrote the test for the RCMP every year I scored terrible. It was just horrible. Like my marks were nowhere near where they needed to be. Well, that year I scored one of the highest marks in the province. Went right through. Most people do the psychological test twice. I took it once. Went through, was the valedictorian of the troop that I was involved with. And I don't say that to brag, but it's part of the story. And on from there. So.
If you hadn't gone to the RCMP, was there any other, you said you became really strong in your faith, was there anything else you may have pursued if by chance you hadn't been accepted?
I really didn't have a plan B, to be honest. And yeah, I don't recommend that. I think you should have a plan B, but I just felt so strongly about this that I just continued to dog it, pursue it, and so yeah.
So, what brought you from BC to here? And
from Manitoba?
The switch up. I'm sorry. What was the switch between?
Yeah. Yeah, well, we lived in a fairly isolated area, and for me, you know, I had my job, and I was very happy, very content there. For my wife, it was difficult. She took her law degree while we were there, so she traveled 3 hours each way every week from where we lived to Winnipeg to be part of the law program. And so after she completed her degree, we started thinking about children, and my father actually was sick at that time, and so we had asked for a transfer for compassionate reasons. It wasn't happening. We really wanted to be back home near family, and when this opportunity came up, we jumped at it.
I guess that kind of segues into your role as a communications officer here. What is one of the most stressful things you find with your job as a communications officer in Frederick?
I think where the stress comes from, we have a very good relationship with our media community here, and we have a small community. It's not like working in a larger center where you have many journalists that you probably wouldn't know on a first-name basis. But here we know everyone, and we do have good relationships. But you know, our goals are different. Obviously, our main goal is to protect the community, and the main goal of the media community is to inform the community. And there's a very strong relationship, I believe, between public trust and public safety. The authority figures in the community, obviously, you know, from politicians, and then you get to our level of policing, where we're trying to provide public safety. If we don't have the trust of our community members, then that often equates to a reduction in public safety out there, because people decide, you know what, I'm not interested in following your rules. I'm going to do what I want, and that can be perpetuated, right? And so my role as the public face for the police is closely connected with the amount of trust people will place in the police. And so I carry some of that. And whether that's perceived on my part or whether that's the reality, I think it's probably a bit of both. It does create stress. And you know, there can be tension between my relationship with the media because of our different you know, our different goals, different ultimate outcomes. And so sometimes there can be a perception that we're trying to hide information, or we're trying to be, you know, skirt around issues. And there are times when we not necessarily try to hide, but we have to avoid answering certain questions because of our interests and because of certain rules and you know, regulations and legislation under the Police Act. Our priority is the integrity of the investigation, first and foremost.
Have you ever felt misled by a journalist in this community?
I have. Yeah, that's very rare. But on one occasion, I was asked to provide a follow-up interview on a particular matter, and I won't get into the details of that because I don't want to, you know, reveal who the particular individual was. But suffice to say that it was framed as a follow-up, you know, a simple follow-up. I had already provided a media scrum the day before on this incident, and I felt that the scrum, or the follow-up, went very, very well, and there were actually a couple of other representatives of different agencies who were there who weren't able to attend the scrum the day before. And so I felt that interaction went very well, but there were a couple of points where I stumbled with my words, and that happens, you know, and most professional journalists will avoid that, you know, and they want a good clip, right? People are going for a good clip, and so this was an area where I stumbled a bit. I was fairly new at the job, and that was basically the only portion of about 10 minutes of good interaction. That was the portion that was played, and it was played in the light of police are saying that the community is safe, however, and then they show me kind of messing up a little bit, and I felt that was a burn. And there have been other officers that were burned by that particular individual as well in similar ways, and interestingly, that person is no longer working here.
Do you think the Frederick Police Force have ever misled a journalist? Because you say you do keep certain information to yourself, so, I mean, this can be understood.
Well, I think misled is a very strong word. there are times when we will have to not answer a question. I think to say misled, that there's a connotation there that we would lie about something. And I certainly, both from a personal standpoint and a professional standpoint, see no value in that. Number one, if you lie, the truth always comes out, right? So if I'm trying to mislead you on a certain issue and say that we're doing this when we're not, or that this happened when it didn't, that's going to affect my credibility, and what's the point of that? So it's easier for me, if I can't answer a question, I might give a canned response, for instance, or I may just say that I'm unable to answer that question as a result of the ongoing investigation, and that information is sensitive, things of that nature, right? But to come out and mislead, there's no value in that, from my view.
Just kind of following off that and your previous comment about how this one journalist kind of put you in a different light, does that make you question a journalist's ability at the accuracy of the reporting or the storytelling? Yes.
Not in general, but if there's an individual who does that, yeah. I mean, if I don't have a trust level with the journalist, if I don't feel that the information which is affecting people's lives, if that information is not going to be handled and distributed properly, then they may get one chance. I may speak to them one-on-one, which I have done with a number of journalists, and if that is not respected, then I will go to the agency and simply advise them I won't be working with this journalist.
Why do you feel there's a difference? You said in talked to one of our students before that sometimes you don't answer questions of freelance reporters. You don't like answering our questions. But why do you feel there's a division between us in the media and the normal media? Because a lot of students in this room have and are working in the media.
Yes.
So there is a lot of experience there. And people
Sure. And I'm going to call you out on one point there. I've never said that I don't like answering your questions.
Okay,
but I have said there are certain questions that I will not answer. And there are different viewpoints on that, and I concede that. And do I feel that you are professionals? In my experience, you certainly act like professionals. My experience with this program and the students, and some of you, who are working with the Brunswickan, who have certain experience, who are working for established papers, perhaps there is a difference there, right? But my experience has been very positive with working with this group, with the students, and I very much enjoy doing it. Do I feel, however, that I should be treating you at the same level as a professional journalist who is out there earning their living, who is not gaining experience, but who are actually working for an agency? That's their livelihood, and they're under certain regulations, expectations. I think there is, and I'll tell you why. I would look at this program as being on par with a doctor who is conducting residency, or a law student, or a law graduate rather, who is involved with their articling, or a police officer who is involved in their on-the-job training. Okay, you are in the process of gaining experience, right? And this is the time to gain experience. This is the time to grow, to make the mistakes, which you will make, okay, and to learn from them and to move on, so that when you do go out there and you're applying for jobs, that you feel a confidence level and a comfort level that you're going to be able to do this and do it very well. All right? If I hold you to the level that I hold, say, a Terry Sege or any of the Michael Staples, these people who are seasoned journalists who've been in the field for a number of years, then there's no room for mistakes. Okay? So if you're in a learning environment, you're trying to gain experience, and I hold you to that level, how is that going to work out for you if you are making the mistake of misrepresenting me or anything of that nature? I'm not suggesting you will or you do. I'm just saying, if that happens, then that's not going to be a positive experience for you in your learning environment. And so I'm open to the idea that that view is opposed. But that's our position. May that change in the future? Perhaps. But that's the take I have at this point.
But what, as I said before, what do you make of students who have worked in the field in summer positions or even during school years for years? And there are people in this class who have done so, and they are in journalism jobs even now, or even if you deal with interns from news confederations.
Yeah.
All these people are professional media who are being paid.
Yes.
What is the difference there?
I think there is a difference there. You're not in a learning environment. You are under the auspices or under the umbrella of the Brunswickian or under the auspices of the Aquinian. Okay, that's not a learning environment. At least that's my understanding. If it is, then I should be corrected on that.
No, but there's the New Brunswick Beacon is also an official media site.
That's true. However, it is part of a learning environment. It is an environment which is as a result of a learning experience or a website. Now, it's published, right? This is information that is published. And so the argument would be, well, okay, we are professionals because we publish. Bloggers publish as well. Are we considering ourselves on par with them, right? There's a whole spectrum to this argument that we could go into. And I'm not sure at the end of the day if we would get any further. Perhaps we would. But ultimately, what my position is to support this program, to support this group, to engage you as much as I possibly can, and to provide as much information to you as I possibly can. My goal is not to hide information from you. However, if I don't view this as a separate, as a level, perhaps, maybe that's a way to put it, then you have to ask yourselves, am I prepared to be considered someone who can't make a mistake, right, in a learning environment?
Just to kind of play off that then, you mentioned how like a police officer in training, or I didn't understand the law reference, I'm not going to lie there, or a doctor in training. What if we were on site with, say, a reporter that's already seasoned and we fell into that category? Would we then be considered, in a way, media that could receive that information because we're with someone who's seasoned? Because I know doctors who are in training can still perform surgery.
Yeah, and often, and maybe some of you from this class, and I don't recall, but I have had students who attend an actual scrum where our media community are present, and it's a major issue. And I have no issues with them being in the scrum. But what I normally do there is I'll ask them to allow our professional media personnel to ask the questions that they want, and then following that, I'd be happy to answer any of the questions that they have as well.
I would just like to get back to the point of the New Brunswick Beacon, because, I mean, yes, the university is the one who basically gives the website out, but it's not. It is still an official media website.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's the same as the Aquinian. It's put on by students, but it's an official media. I mean, it's the same people reading the Aquinian as people reading the New Brunswick Beacon. So, wouldn't that be more of a personal opinion to say that one is a class website, as you would maybe call it, and one is a paper put on by university students, but it's the same people, and there is not, like, isn't that more of an opinion of yours, that one is a class website and one is a paper? Because technically they're both official media outlets.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and I think it probably is. It probably does boil down to opinion. And the other thing you have to consider is that the information that I share with the community, the media community, is my prerogative. Okay, if I don't share something, then it doesn't matter who you are. I'm not sharing that information. Okay, that may be to my detriment. I may look bad on camera, or I may be presented in a particular light. You may decide that you'll go and get information in another way, and that's fine. But ultimately, that decision rests with the chief of police or his designate, which would be myself. Okay, so. the information that goes out, I have to know who it's going to, and I have to trust that it's going to be used appropriately and disseminated appropriately, okay? And so, again, if that information is provided to a student that I feel is sensitive, that I don't know, and I know that you're in a learning environment, that you're gaining experience, I don't think that's fair to hold a student to the same standard. That's just my opinion, okay? Right or wrong, that's my opinion. I don't hold the police officers, okay? Police officers who are professionals, who are doing their on-the-job training, they are peace officers, they have that status. I do not hold them to the same standard, okay? I don't expect them to do the same thing that someone who has come through that, who has gained that experience, and now have reached certain hurdles or certain levels, that they have now expectations on them. It's the same, well, no, it's not the same, but I guess as an analogy, as you go up the rank structure in a police force, right, the expectations are higher and higher, and the information that you're provided with is more and more sensitive as well. And so, yeah, I'm open to the fact that this is an agree to disagree, or an area where we conflict. However, having said that, it is our prerogative who we provide our information to. I want to provide it to this program. I think it helps with your training, it helps with your gaining experience, and it's going to bode well in the future for when we do work together. If you end up working for CBC, or if you work for Global, or whoever, that we're going to have those established relationships, right, which we may have for a number of years. So that's where we're at with it. Again, is that something that's set in stone? I don't know. But that's where the dialogue is at this point.
Okay, thank you very much for coming.
Constable Mooney raised more questions than he answered.
He said that he wanted to have a good relationship with the students and help the program, yet he still won't treat us like real media.
He says he does not have much time, yet only 5 students contacted him in the last month.
He also said that no student journalist from St. Thomas University has ever misrepresented information from him, unlike journalists in the field.
We do hope the interview may have helped our relationship with Constable Mooney. For Stu Journalism, I'm Viola Puth.
And I'm Brianna James.